So, Ryan, we've been doing these podcasts for 5 years now, mate.
Has it only been 5 years, Colin? It feels like forever.
It feels longer, I know. And there's an area that we've not ever really dealt with that I think has a real big impact on customer experience. And that's the subject or the area of field service and field service engineers and that whole area, because I think ironically, I used to run field service engineers back in the day, but more of that a bit later, I guess. Knowing that we hadn't talked about that, I decided that I would reach out to MichaelIsrael. Michael is a field service evangelist and member of a leadership team at Zuper, and Zuper have partnered with us on this episode today. Michael's worked in customer and field service for over 40 years. He spent the last 20 years in managing both domestic and international field service operations, which includes 12 years at IBM. And over the past 3 decades, he's held management and executive roles with providers of CRM and field service software applications with IFS, Oracle, and SAP. So I guess Michael knows everything there is to know about field service environment. So welcome, Michael.
Welcome. Well, thank you very much, Colin. I really appreciate it. It's my pleasure to be here. And it's interesting, actually, you were very kind to me because you said 40 years. I've actually been doing this for 50 years.
Oh, wow.
I started with IBM when I was 19 years old, started in their field engineering division and started as a night dispatcher and a parts room clerk. And then I moved on from there to a variety of different operational positions with IBM. I also managed a field service organization for a CAD/CAM company, as you said, for about 20 years, combined IBM and the CAD/CAM company. And then I moved into the software space and I've been associated with field service software and CRM software for the better part of the last 30 years. And part of that time was also as a field service analyst for a couple of the major analyst firms. So yeah, I've been in field service a long time, and I'd say that I probably know a little bit about it.
Yeah, sounds like it, mate.
Yeah.
So why is it, I guess sort of to a certain extent, by definition of us not even having talked about it, it seems to be an area that a lot of people overlook, but when you actually start to think about it, it's fundamentally important, isn't it?
Yeah, extremely. It's always surprising to me when people will ask me what I do, and I say, well, I work for a software company, and they say, what kind of software? And I say, field service. And then almost inevitably, they'll say, well, what is field service? And so my answer is always, it's ubiquitous. It's all around you. It's the technician that comes to your house to repair and maintain your air conditioner. It's the plumber that comes to your house to replace the water heater. It's the landscaper that comes to your house to mow the lawn. It's the highly skilled technicians that go install robotic operating arms in surgical centers. Yeah. So field service surrounds us all the time. Odds are, whenever you see a van driving down the street, it's probably being driven by a field service person that is going somewhere to install something, to repair something, to inspect something, to remove something, to upgrade something. It just is all around us. And I think in a way that's kind of why we don't really think about it, because it just is part of our daily life, so to speak, and we just don't pay a lot of attention to it.
And the issue for me is that, and why I thought this would be a good topic, is that sometimes with an organization, they're the only physical people that you ever see, aren't they? I mean, we yesterday, I just upgraded my broadband, and then I've had some problems with it. So the engineer came out to have a look at it, and I was thinking, you know what? I've spoken to people on the phone, obviously, but I've never actually seen anybody from the cable company other than this guy. And therefore, the impression I get a lot is based upon that, isn't it?
Absolutely. I mean, you've hit on a really, really important topic. Field service people are the face of your company.
Yeah.
You know, when you buy a piece of hardware from a manufacturer for your business, you'd probably deal with a salesperson before you consummate the deal and the hardware gets delivered. But who do you see
Yeah.
after that? It's always the field service engineers, the
Yeah.
technicians that come and install it, come and inspect it, come and repair it, come and replace it. So the field service organization absolutely are the people that you see more often that represent the company than you see anybody else in the company.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. I have you ever seen that video from John Cleese? I don't know if you know that he did visual arts. Do you ever see that one?
I'm not sure I've seen that one. I'm certainly familiar with him, but I don't know about that one specifically.
I'll put a link in the show notes because it's a really it reminds me back in the day. So I used to work for British Telecom, okay, and therefore we obviously had a number of engineers that were going out. And I always remember watching this video from it was a training video, and it was about it was called "Who Sold You This Thing?"
Okay.
And it was of a field service engineer who effectively would go around into the customers, exactly as you said, and go, "Oh, bloody hell, who sold you this thing? Oh, they shouldn't have sold you that. They should have sold you this." But it was trying to make the point that field services was really important and could make or break an organization because customers tend to believe them more than a salesperson. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, I can just envision in that video, the next thing logically that field service person would do is probably do whatever is necessary to make the customer happy with whatever he or she bought, right? So get it to operate properly and make sure that the customer knows how to use it properly so that they get the best productivity out of it, et cetera. That would be the next logical part of that story.
Yeah. Well, and one of the bits that as I was watching this the other day, one of the bits that it sort of pointed out, which I hadn't really thought about before, was typically the field service engineer turns up when something's gone wrong, so that they turn up to fix something, and therefore the customer could be feeling, the emotions that the customer are feeling when they're entering that experience. Could be difficult to deal with, couldn't they?
We're kind of setting up these field techs to fail oftentimes from a customer experience standpoint. Like they're the ones who are going to have to go in when the customer's already angry, at least some of the time.
Yeah, I think that happens often. I mean, I'm sure all three of us have some personal experiences with that. I certainly do. But I also know that if the field service person is well-trained, is knowledgeable about what they're working on, and equally importantly, has a sense of empathy for the customer and has the soft skills necessary to soothe the customer. I've been extremely angry at a couple of times recently because I just moved and had a bunch of unanticipated problems in my new house. But I've been extremely pleased when the service technician has shown up and has not only been able to take care of the problem, but more importantly, has been able to take care of me.
Yes.
And turn my attitude around from one of anger to one of gratitude, right? And that's a really skilled field service person will not just be skilled in the technology, but will be skilled in human relations and how to mend a customer so that the customer remains a customer of that company going forward.
And how many organizations do you think really focus on that sort of more human aspect of things? Because my sense is that they're more focused on the just fixing the bloody problem and limiting the amount of time that the engineer is gone out there in the first place rather than focusing on that.
Well, it's an interesting point. I think certainly there are companies still that sort of see service as a necessary evil. I sold the product, now I've got to take care of it, darn it. And that used to be the prevalent attitude. I mean, it really wasn't that negative, but the prevalent attitude for many, many years was product is king. That's where the vast majority of the revenue comes from. That's where the profit comes from. But over the past couple decades, there's been research done, and I did some of that research. As I mentioned, I was a field service analyst for a couple of the analyst firms, that shows that field service organizations typically contribute anywhere from 25 to 40% of corporate revenue. And often they contribute as much as 60% of the profit.
Wow.
And there are organizations out there that are 100% field service, like companies like Field Nation. That's all they do is provide field service.
Right.
And so 100% of the revenue and 100% of the profit comes from them. So I think the executives in the C-suite have begun to realize that, hey, service is not just a necessary evil. It's a necessary competitive differentiator. It's a necessary part of our services and products that we provide to our customers, and we better do it well, because if we don't, our competitors will.
Right.
Those revenue and profit numbers, do those come from like the billing on the service, or is that from like additional sales afterwards or upsales? Like how does that break down, if you remember?
Yeah, I can't give you the exact percentages, but it comes from primarily two places. One is time and material services. In other words, if I have a plumber come to my house to repair or replace my water heater, I pay on an hourly basis, and I pay for the parts or the product that the plumber has used. And it also comes from service contracts. Now, I don't know how it is elsewhere in the world, but here in the States, if you go to a Best Buy store or Costco or anywhere and you buy a new appliance, you buy a new television, the first thing they ask you when you check out is, do you want to buy an extended service contract?
Sure.
So service contracts can be very, very profitable. That's why companies offer them. And for manufacturing organizations, offering service and maintenance contracts is a significant part of the revenue generation that service contributes.
Yeah. 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 Funny enough, the cable person that came round yesterday did an exceptionally good job at trying to upgrade me to the next level. And as I was talking to him, I was thinking to myself, if your boss was here, he'd be really pleased with you.
Yeah.
Because he, did the right thing. So, he presented here's what I've done. This is what I've, these are the services that we've got. He noticed that we'd got a different TV box, a Sky box. I'm in England at the moment. If you came to our company, you could get all of this. And I was actually quite surprised how much time he spent on, I won't say trying to sell. Well, he was trying to sell me, but I didn't feel that it was inappropriate, I have to say.
Did it feel like education?
It felt a bit more like education. And I think the other thing is that I just tend to trust those people more because they just feel like they've got a bit more knowledge.
It does feel different being sold by an engineer than being sold by a salesperson. That's a different experience.
Yeah.
Well, I think a lot of organizations, rightfully so, tend to view their field service engineers as the primary connection to the customer. Right. And so they want their field service engineers to develop a close relationship with their customers. They want their customers to see the field service engineers and the field service organization as partners in their success, not just somebody that comes and turns a wrench and gets something working if it had a problem. So part of a field engineer's job, as we've discussed, is to ease the customer's concerns, ease the customer's fear, oftentimes ease the customer's anger, but also build a solid relationship and a trusting relationship with them.
Yeah.
I think very successful organizations and very successful field service people do that really well.
So
Sorry, go on.
Oh, thanks. Can you talk to us about the intersection between the field service tech, customer experience, but then also like the software and kind of process part of this? Like, let me contextualize this with an experience. We had one morning we woke up and we didn't have internet at the house.
Mm-hmm.
It turned out that some system had flagged within our internet service provider. There was some problem with our junction box that was going to cause a system problem. So it was going to affect other people. So they just pulled up at like 6 a.m. and disconnected our internet and didn't tell us, and drove away. So it's kind
Especially
of
if you have to work using the internet.
yeah, no, it was luckily it happened on a day that I didn't have to teach remotely or something. But so we didn't know what was going on. A few hours later, we called. The guy who came out and fixed the problem could not have been nicer. He was just he fixed the problem. He was angry on our behalf that we hadn't been properly notified. He took care of everything, and then he put it in order to have the cable buried underneath our driveway. That was later canceled automatically by someone somewhere within the cable, and so we needed to go through. So the field experience was great. He was fantastic, but the overall experience was terrible because of the processes that were involved. Like they had this skilled employee who was doing the best that he could, but it was embedded within a process that caused all kinds of problems. And I assume that that's kind of the next stage in evolution of field service management, is getting everything to work well together.
Well, I think the key word there is together. So, obviously the field service engineer was doing something that somebody in the back office somewhere didn't know that he or she was doing.
Yes.
So I think an important aspect of software and software integrations is to make sure that information that the field service technician is recording on his or her mobile device is shared in real time when necessary with all of the people that can have an impact on the service that was just delivered. So if you've got a field service person coming to your house to fix something as they were doing in your case, and somebody else is scheduled to come and install a box somewhere that's going to disrupt your service immediately afterwards, then it would behoove that organization to make sure that they have software in place and processes in place within that software that automatically notifies the appropriate people that, hey, a field service engineer has just been on site, has just done a repair. Before you take the next step to remove a box and install a new box, make sure you notify the customer that that's happening and delay that effort by a day or something like that, And I think with SaaS software today, all of that is possible. I mean, for example, the company I work for, Zuper, we have out-of-the-box integrations with over 60 other products, including several well-known CRM products. So the capabilities to take advantage of the technology is certainly there that can enable those kinds of communications when necessary. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah. I think too, software, just from a software standpoint, from a field service perspective, software is really important for a number of reasons. One is it helps organizations to keep track of not only their customers, but also the equipment that's installed at the customers, what the service history is of that equipment, what the maintenance coverage is on those equipment, maintenance agreement coverage is on those pieces of equipment. It keeps track of all the billing information that goes out to that customer, both for time and material services and service contracts. It keeps track of all the costs involved in servicing that equipment. So the labor, the hourly labor rates, the cost of the parts used, the cost of the travel to get to the customer location, so that the C-suite in charge of service operations can do profitability analyses and can look at things like, okay, in Denver, Colorado, for example, my service costs on this particular type of equipment are much higher than they are in San Francisco. Why is that? Maybe my technicians aren't trained well enough in Denver. Maybe there's a climate issue that's impacting the performance of the equipment in Denver due to the cold weather and the high altitude, for example. So, and those are just simple examples of the kinds of analytical capabilities that service software can provide to executives that enables them to spot trends and take corrective actions and actually improve their service further.
So a lot of that feels to me like a bit of a no-brainer. So it makes me just wonder why organizations don't look at that type of thing. I mean, is that because they see it as a cost and they just don't want to invest, or what?
I think for some smaller companies, that's the case. I mean, we still run across people that are using whiteboards and spreadsheets to keep track of their activities. Right. And frankly, they're amazed when they implement a software solution like ours that gives them that much control over their operations. But there's still a lot of companies that are using manual procedures or using systems that weren't really designed for service, but they've kind of made them work, even though it's difficult. So, for example, ERP systems are not designed to manage service. Manufacturing systems aren't not designed to manage field service. Even CRM systems are well designed for for customer support and telephone support, but they really aren't designed specifically for field service. So, I think there's a lot of companies that are trying to use systems that they have for purposes which they were not designed for.
Right.
And then there are a number of companies that are simply migrating from older legacy systems to newer technologies. So it's still a large market out there for software vendors like us.
And how do you deal then? I mean, if I remember back to my old days, and I'm sure it's pretty much the same now. But one of the problems just used to be recording what the customer had and recording what you'd actually done. Mm-hmm. So it's a bit like the engineer that came to our place yesterday. I was having this intermittent fault on the broadband, and he basically went and changed all the connectors. And one of the things he said was, one of the connectors that you've got was an old connector that was reducing the signal strength of your blah, blah. And you think to yourself, why did they just not know that when I'd upgraded my broadband to 1 gig, that actually that I'd got this connector in there that needed to be upgraded? Why is there still this gap between what people must know that they're doing, that they should be doing, and they're not? I mean, again, is it just that they don't think it's important enough, or what?
Boy, I'm not sure I can really answer that question specifically. I mean, obviously, it comes down to the accuracy of the data.
Yeah.
And so I think it's very important that organizations have software in place that allows them to keep track of, in an accurate and thorough manner, the equipment that is installed at their customer locations and what the components of that equipment are.
Yeah.
And what parts.
But where does that break down then? I don't want to get too specific, but it just makes you think, well, where does it break down? Is it the engineer not putting the information on the system? Is it that the systems aren't communicating with each other to say what's down there? Or is it probably all of those things and loads
Michael,
of
what's
other
wrong with
things?
people? Can you tell us why people are broken?
Well, I have my opinions, but I'm not sure I should share them on this show. So I think it's a combination of things. I think data accuracy is one of them. I think the accuracy of the input that the technicians provide when they're performing service, the thoroughness of the training of the technicians when they're performing the service. So I'm not sure you could pinpoint any one specific item, but clearly accuracy of the data and accuracy of of recording the work that is performed is clearly an important aspect in as far as that's concerned.
Sure.
I'm curious about this training aspect. This is maybe a little bit outside of the scope of your role now, but from your perspective and the experience you have, how good is the training in general for technicians across all the industry? I mean, it strikes me that many organizations are likely to focus on the technical aspects of it. I see that kind of soft skills training tends to be less great in general, but maybe I'm wrong about that. Like, I'm sure it's come a long way, but I would also guess that it's still an opportunity for a lot of companies.
Yeah, I think there's always an opportunity to improve the training, both from a technical standpoint and a soft skills standpoint. But I would say, on the other hand, that especially the very high-tech companies do an outstanding job, in my experience, at training their technicians in the technicalities of the products and the methods and procedures that need to be used in order to maintain and repair the products. So the companies that I've dealt with as an analyst, for example, especially when they're high-tech companies, and by high-tech, I'm including even HVAC, heating, ventilating, and air conditioning companies, because some of those systems are very, very sophisticated. They have done a remarkable job, the companies that I'm familiar with, in training their technicians. not only in the technical skills, but also in the soft skills. I mean, I'm familiar with a couple of companies. One of them is in digital buildings, and another is a very large HVAC organization in the United States that has put programs in place specifically to enhance the soft skills of their technicians. And they actually have reward programs based upon the performance of the technicians, not just from a technical aspect, but also from a customer interaction aspect. So I think many companies are taking training on both fronts, technical and soft skills, very, very seriously.
That is very heartening to hear. That's great.
Yeah, and it goes along with really a philosophy that we have at Zuper and that we're trying aggressively to promote, and that is a philosophy and a culture of what we refer to as completed service work. And to us, completed service work means simply, if I'm a technician, when I'm done with my work, when I've done with the repair that I've done, I'm not done yet. I'm only done when I ask the customer, is there anything else I can do for you? When I perceive that the customer may have some training needs that I could help them with. If I observe that, gee, there's a possible upgrade to this equipment that might help the customer become more productive. If there's any concerns that I might be able to address for the customer. In other words, proactively address what the customer might need or want next after I'm done with my repair. That's completed service work, and we're trying to promote that extensively.
Right.
And I think a lot of companies, whether they know that terminology or not, are trying to adopt that culture.
Right. And where do you see this going, Michael, over the next couple of years? Any thoughts of what the sort of the latest trends are and where you see it going?
Yeah, certainly there's some trends towards predictive maintenance, so artificial intelligence and machine learning that are analyzing the performance of equipment and actually predicting when a failure might occur and what the type of failure might be, and then proactively notifying the service organization that, gee, you need to schedule a service call on this piece of equipment because indications that we're getting from our Internet of Things capabilities are showing us that a failure may be imminent. So you need to go out and replace the coil in that refrigeration unit, for example, before it fails. So I think that's certainly a trend. I think that there is a greater trend emerging also for remote support, virtual technician, where the technician on site is holding up a smartphone and showing an image of the piece of equipment that needs to be worked on to a technician in the back office, a very skilled technician in the back office. And that technician is walking through the diagnostic and the triage and the repair of that equipment remotely with the service engineer that's on site.
Right.
And that improves the response and repair times, of course, and the restoration time for the equipment. But at the same time, it also helps train the technician that's on site using the remote device to get that remote support.
Yeah.
So those are a couple of trends.
One of the we had a podcast a little while ago that was talking about the customer use of video, or the organization and customer use of video. So, if I go back to the old days, you'd obviously try to diagnose the fault before you send the engineer out there, and you'd want the engineer to go out there with all the right equipment and know what they're doing, blah, 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 blah.
Mm-hmm.
And therefore the use of video where the customer can actually show what the issue is. And sometimes it's obviously easier just to show somebody what's happening than try to, from a naive perspective, explain to them what's happening. Yeah, is that an increasing trend that you're seeing?
Oh, I think so. It's exactly what I was just talking about as well. It's not just for the technician that's on site. It's for the customer. It's augmented reality and virtual reality being used by a remote technician to walk not just a technician through a fix, but also walk a customer through a fix.
Yeah.
And so I think that is an emerging trend that will certainly continue as well. And the more organizations can do that for their customers, the less costly the service delivery is going to be, obviously. the bottom line really is: are you keeping your customers happy? And if they're happy, are they going to stay loyal to you?
Sure.
And if they're loyal, are they going to spend more money with you? And are they going to give references to their friends and family and business acquaintances? I mean, it all pays off in the long run, for sure.
Sure. So let's draw this to a close, and let me ask you one last question. Any thoughts and you, Ryan, as well? What are the practical things that people could do? What do you think? If you to finish with some practical advice of what organizations should do to improve their field service, what would it be?
Well, the number one practical thing that I would recommend is, get on board with technology. If you're not using current technology to manage your service operations and therefore get a good handle on your costs and your revenues and your profitability, and equally importantly, your customer satisfaction and customer loyalty, then you're missing the boat. If you're not doing it, your competitor is going to do it if they're not doing it already. So take advantage of the technology that's out there, the technology that's coming down the pike, and implement that technology to manage your operations and retain your customers in a much more efficient and satisfactory way.
Great. Okay. Ryan, any thoughts from anything?
Just to not neglect this channel for managing customer experience. I think as you can redesign your website to be more streamlined. You can redesign your phone tree so that it's easier to navigate. But the power of reversing a bad experience by having another human being there interacting with your customer, I think it cannot be overemphasized. So
one final thought just to augment what you said is one of my favorite consultants is a fellow by the name of David Knorr, and he has a saying that says, "Sales makes the promises to the customers, service delivers on the promises." And that's exactly what you just said in different words, Ryan.
I think that wraps it up beautifully, right? The power of another human being to kind of manage that relationship is you should be maximizing that opportunity within your organization.
Absolutely.
And the thing I would add is what you said, Michael, which is just the integration of the communication. Letting the left hand know what the right hand's doing, and to your example, Ryan, just showed that lack of integration with and therefore causing a problem. I think that would have a really big effect on organizations.
Yeah.
Okay, Michael. So if people want to get hold of you, then how should they do that?
Well, they can do it. They can find me on LinkedIn. There is another MichaelIsrael on LinkedIn that's a famous artist. That's not me, but if you scroll down, you'll find me. My business email address is simple. It's Michael, MICHAEL, .Israel, ISRAEL, at Zuper, ZUPER, .co. And I emphasize the .co. It's not .com. It's .co.
Okay.
So be glad to receive and answer any emails that anyone wants to send me as well.
Great. Okay. Well, as usual, we'll include those links in the show notes. And thanks very much, Michael, for coming on the show today. Been really interesting and an area that we should have discussed before, but been great having you on the show.
Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. It's been my pleasure. And if you ever want to do it again, I'm here. So
great.
Thanks been great.
Thanks so much for watching. And if you enjoyed this video, please make sure you subscribe so you don't miss an episode.